at the farm with Cristian Rivera?
Yes, I did. Later in that afternoon, I did.
Where was that at?
It was outside the milk parlor. I was contacted by Joe Arian that advised if I could drive Mr. Rivera to the Powashik County Sheriff's Office.
Who is Joe Arian?
Joe Arian's a special agent out of Dubuque, Iowa.
You said that he was in a certain building at the farm?
Yes.
Where did you encounter Cristian Rivera?
I call it the milk parlor or the office area of this dairy farm.
Okay. Were you ever able to identify any vehicle that was associated with Cristian Rivera?
The vehicle on the farm was a brown Nissan that was driven by Mr. Rivera.
Not a Chevy Malibu?
No.
Was the Nissan Altima parked near the building where you encountered Mr. Rivera?
Yes, it was.
All right. Did you ever identify the black Chevy Malibu?
As we did the neighborhood canvas, Mr. Chapeta identified Kristian was on the farm in the office milk parlor, as well as that there was a black Malibu located on another farmstead.
Okay, so just to be clear, the Altima was near where Cristian Rivera was working on August 20th of 2018?
Correct.
The Malibu was not?
Correct.
All right, the Malibu was in relation to the building that he was encountered in, where you encountered him, where was the Malibu?
The Malibu was located on adjacent farmstead on 200th Street, I would say a couple miles east of the Yarby Farms.
You didn't have anything to do with searching that vehicle, correct?
No, I did not.
Did you have anything to do with gaining consent to search the Malibu or the Altima?
No, I did not.
All right. Your job was to transport Mr. Rivera to the sheriff's office?
Yes, it was.
You were requested to do that by Joe Arian?
Yes.
Did you do that?
Yes, I did.
Whenever you took Mr. Rivera back to the sheriff's office, did you handcuff him?
No, I did not.
Where did he sit in your vehicle for the ride?
He sat in the front seat with me.
Did he ever protest that he did not want to go with you?
No.
Did you ever tell him anything?
No, I did not.
Okay. What time did you leave the farm?
About 3:15.
And what's the drive from the farm to the sheriff's office?
25, 30 minutes.
At any time during this ride, did you make any conversation with Cristian Rivera about Mollie Tibbetts?
No, he did not.
Was there any discussion at all between you and Cristian Rivera?
Just initially about the weather.
Okay. And was that in English?
Yeah.
Did you try to get a conversation going with him between the farm and the sheriff's office and he just didn't reply?
No, I did not.
Did he ever ask you any questions?
No, he did not.
Did he have a cell phone? Did Mr. Rivera have a cell phone with him?
Later, when he got to the sheriff's office, I know noticed he was on a cell phone.
Did you see a cell phone on his person prior to him getting in your car?
No, I did not.
Prior to him getting in your car, did you search him in any way?
No, I did not.
Whenever you arrived at the sheriff's office, where did you park?
I parked right up front by the front doors.
Would this be the doors that the general public could enter the sheriff's office?
Yes.
Did you enter the public door?
Yes, we did.
So you did not take him in through a sally port or through a secure entrance, is that right?
Correct.
Did you grab a hold of him or restrain him in any way between the vehicle and going into the lobby with him?
No, I did not.
Did he walk in on his own?
Yes, he did.
Is he in front of you or behind you or beside you? Do you know?
I think I held the door open.
Okay. At this point in time, was there any protest or questions from Cristian Rivera?
No, there was not.
Where did you sit in the lobby?
As I sat in the lobby, he sat in a chairs next to like the entryway to the, I would say the jail or a jail area, and I sat next to like the dispatch area in a chair.
I told you I wasn't going to use any photos with you, and now I'm going to. I want you to look at, hang on just a second, let me get to it. It's exhibit number 18, if you'll just double click on that.
Yep.
Do you see that?
Yep.
Do you see the chair that Mr. Rivera was sitting in this photo?
Not really. It's more across from the Powesheet County sign.
Okay.
I think there was some chairs sitting on that side, and I was sitting more towards that Powesheet County jail intercom area.
So were you sitting next to Mr. Rivera?
No, I was not.
Was there anybody else in the lobby with you?
No, there was not.
Did any other law enforcement officer come in and sit nearer to Cristian Rivera than you did?
No, nobody.
How long were you in the lobby with him?
Probably 20 minutes. I was working on paperwork.
Did you have any conversation with Cristian Rivera while you were in the lobby?
No.
Was he allowed to keep his cell phone?
Yes.
Did he appear to use it while he was there with you?
I believe he was on the phone.
Was he talking on the phone or texting?
He wasn't talking.
He was using it.
Using it, yeah.
Did you ever ask to look at the cell phone?
No.
What paperwork were you completing while you were there?
I was working on the neighborhood canvas I just done with the Mario Chapetas.
And by the way, just so the judge understands, whenever you do a neighborhood canvas, is there a form that you utilize?
We're utilizing a form, 3-page form in this particular case.
All right, and every officer utilizes that same form, so it's somewhat uniform when you have to go back and look at it.
Correct.
All right, and that's what you were filling out?
Yes.
Did anyone that you're aware of take any steps to lock the public door that we see here in State's Exhibit 18?
No.
If Mr. Rivera wanted to, could he have gotten out of his chair and gone through that door on his own power?
Yes, at any time.
While you were with Mr. Rivera in the lobby, did you provide him with anything?
Yes, one of the agents came out and asked for whether you wanted a drink, and that was provided for him.
Do you know who that agent was?
I believe that was the case agent, Trent Valletta,
So he was given water,
or Pop, I forget which.
or was he given any food?
Not that I've seen.
Anything else of significance in your interaction with Mr. Rivera in the lobby we have not covered?
No.
Anything else significant with your interaction with Mr. Rivera in the car that we have not covered?
No.
Did you leave the sheriff's office?
A short time later, we did.
All right. What did you do after leaving?
Me and Joe Airy went back to the RV Farms, and we met with the other agents and did completing that canvas, and proceeded to another farmstead where Mr. Rivera was living, or the Black Malibu may be located.
So the investigation continued.
Correct.
Did you have anything to do with the interview of Cristian Rivera?
No, I did not.
Did you have any other interaction with him that we have not already discussed?
No, I did not.
All right. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, if you could explain to me in layman's terms your best definition of a neighborhood canvas.
This neighborhood canvas form contains like if they've seen Mollie Tibbetts, last time they've seen them, how they know Mollie or the family. It's basic background information about if they are aware of the Tibbetts family, last time seen, where their locations were at, and et cetera.
So in this case, you had a specialized form that you used for this case, is that right?
It was more specialized for this particular case.
All right, and a neighborhood canvas, does that always look the same?
No.
Particularly, I'm sure when the beginning stages of you finding out about Ms. Tibbetts' disappearance, it was probably more scattered and just talking to whoever you could, is that right?
Correct. We try to do it more organized through like a block search of that Brooklyn at that past week when I was there.
Now, in these neighborhood canvases, these specific questions were asked to everyone, is that right?
As far as I know, yes.
In the neighborhood canvases that involved Yarby Farms, there was a specific meeting ahead of time, is that right?
Correct.
And what was the purpose of that meeting?
The purpose was to identify who the driver of the Black Malibu was, if Cristian Rivera was going to be located at the farm, if anybody else seen Mr. Rivera, or Mollie Tibbetts, to that matter goes. I mean, it was ultimately both dual purpose.
So not only was it a neighborhood canvass, you're looking specifically at Mr. Rivera as a suspect, is that right?
A person of interest, yes.
And then you're looking at this car as a possible vehicle that was used to commit this crime, is that right?
At the time, it was just a vehicle of interest.
Now, when this meeting happened ahead of time, where was it located?
At the Powesheik County Sheriff's Office,
And law enforcement was there, is that right?
correct?
So everyone that was involved in the, this canvas was involved, is that right?
Yes,
I count in other agents' reports about 12 different officers that were involved. Does that sound about right?
pretty close, yes.
There were multiple different special agents, is that right?
Special agent with ICE, Homeland Security, and special agent with the Division of Criminal Investigation.
There were multiple special agents with the Division of Criminal Investigation, is that
Correct.
right? John Bergman, that's an agent with the Division of Criminal Investigation. Wade McKnight,
Correct?
that's another agent that was involved, is
Yep.
that right? John Smith, that's another agent that was involved,
Yep.
is that right? Hunter Bellin, that's another special agent with the Division of Criminal Investigation that was involved, is that right?
Correct?
Brandon Dublitz, that's another special agent with the Division of Criminal Investigation that was involved, is that
Yep.
right? Joshua Hummel was another special agent involved, is that right?
Yep.
We have Joe, is it Arion?
Arian,
Arion, that's another special agent with the Division of Criminal Investigation that was involved, is that right?
correct?
There were 3 different ICE agents that were also involved in this neighborhood canvass, is that right?
Yes,
And also multiple different deputies, is that right?
yes,
So there's a lot of people in this room planning this entrance, is that right?
yes,
Did Yarby Farms know that you were coming?
no,
So you just all showed up, is that right?
yes.
How many different vehicles were involved?
Probably 6 to 8, maybe
So
more.
6 to 8 vehicles descend onto Yarby Farms, is that right?
Yes,
Are these marked vehicles or unmarked vehicles?
all mostly unmarked.
How many of them were marked?
Just the deputy vehicles that I know of that were marked.
How many deputy vehicles were there?
I think there's like 2, maybe 3.
So there were 2 or 3 deputy vehicles, is that right?
Yep,
And then the rest were unmarked law enforcement vehicles, is that right?
yes,
You all pull in at the same time, right?
yes.
And who's taking the lead?
At the time, we were making, was Deputy Kivy was making contact with the owners of the farm initially as we all waited in the car. It was a middle of a thunderstorm at the time, so it was pouring rain. So that we waited until we had their permission, the farm's owner's permission to proceed.
So there's 6 or 8 cars just at this farmstead, is that right?
Yes,
And Deputy Kivy gets out and talks to the owner, is that right?
yes,
The owner, he gives you, you weren't there, but I assume he gives permission, is that right?
yes,
And then you had a plan to kind of formulate teams, is that right?
It was very loosely a plan. I mean, we identified a subject that was working in an outbuilding, myself and Wade McKnight and Special Agent Fischels, and we proceeded to that building that was like, I don't know, maybe 50 yards away. And this subject was working on a tractor, active farmstead, so that's the first person we approached, and after that, it was, everybody just proceeded on their own accord.
And that was a bad question, because I think the team thing may have came from a different witness, but you were working in groups of 3, is that right?
Yes, or maybe 3. I knew we were in a group of 3. I can't speak for everybody else at that time, but I knew that there were multiple agents working with multiple people, so.
All right, so it was decided at this initial meeting beforehand that you would kind of work together in groups, is that right?
Yes,
And I know we just talked about a lot of different law enforcement officers, but how are you dressed?
I am dressed in basically a raincoat, police identifying raincoat, 511s, which are basic BDUs, khaki pants, boots.
What about the remaining DCI agents?
The same, I mean, we're all dressed basically to be outdoors and in the elements.
Do you have your weapons?
It's secreted away like today. So,
So yes, all of the DCI agents had their weapons, is that right?
yes,
And so even though they're dressed and you know, to be in the elements, they all have their weapons on them, is that right?
correct.
What about the ICE agents? How are they dressed?
Plain clothes,
All right, do they have weapons on them?
none that I could see.
And then the deputies that were involved, there were a few different deputies, is that right?
Yes.
How were they dressed?
What the typical deputy wear?
So they're wearing
Normal
sheriff's
uniform, yeah.
All right. And so these groups of people, they go and they approach a specific individual, is that right?
Only one individual was seen outside at this time frame. Everybody else was inside of like I say, the office building or the milk parlor area,
Right. And
based upon what I saw.
And with Mr. Rivera, you can't speak to how he was initially approached.
No, I cannot.
But with Mr. It's Chieta, right?
Yeah,
You initially approached him, is that right?
yep.
And there were 3 officers talking to this one individual, is that right?
It was myself, and I was reading the form, and Mike Fischels was doing the translation.
All right, and he was asked his name, is that right?
Yep,
He was asked his address.
yep,
He was asked if he had any identification on him, is that right?
correct.
And then he was also asked to provide a buccal swab, is that right?
Yep.
What is a buccal swab?
A buccal swab is to take the inside cells of the cheek for DNA purposes, for later examination.
What would be the purpose of asking for a buccal swab?
If there's any evidence discovered later that has DNA, you could either do a connection between the two or make no connection between the two, based upon DNA.
All right, so it'd be looking at him as a potential suspect, is that right?
If it ended up being a suspect at that time.
Now, it's my understanding that the plan was to ask for a buccal swab from every single person that worked at Yarby Farms, is that right?
That was my understanding, yes.
And that is what happened to your understanding, is that right?
Yes.
Now, in previous neighborhood or canvases, had you asked for buccal swabs?
No.
That's not just something that you typically ask for in a neighborhood canvass, is
No,
that
it is
right?
not.
That's something that you specifically decided to ask for because the people at Yarby Farms that worked there were suspects, is that right?
I don't know how we can make that determination at that point in time.
But in any event, you wanted their DNA.
We wanted samples, yes.
All right, now, Mr. Rivera, you get back to the sheriff's office and you basically just sit there with him, is that right?
I'm sitting doing my paperwork, and he's in an adjacent chair behind me, out of my view, an angle view.
The sheriff's office, I'm gonna back up, I apologize. Who made the decision that we're going to ask for these Yarby farm workers' DNA?
The case agent or people beyond him, that wasn't our decision. We were there to provide assistance. So.
Right, so the case agent is Trent Valletta, is that right?
Correct.
So to your understanding, he made the decision to ask for DNA from all of these individuals, is that right?
That'd be my understanding.
Did you also recall telling these people that work there were not from immigration?
I identified myself as who I worked for, and beyond that, I was reading off the form about what we were doing and trying to identify.
All right,
We obviously we were not from immigration at that point in time.
all right, I'm not trying to jump around on you, but so you get back to the sheriff's office, is that right?
Yes,
And you drive Mr. Rivera, who is in your front seat, is that right?
yes.
Where in reference to the sheriff's office do you pull up?
Right near the front door.
Right, and you both get out of the car together, is that
All
right?
three of us do, yeah.
Okay, and you walk inside, is that right?
Yep.
And what do you say to him?
He took a seat, I took a seat, and Joe Arian went back into the sheriff's office to talk to Trent Valletta. and tell him that we had arrived, and et cetera.
What, if anything, did you say to Mr. Rivera?
At that point,
Yes.
I don't think, other than, you know, if he needed a drink or something, they asked him. I wasn't me per se, but I'd already taken a seat and started working on my paperwork.
Did you ever tell him that he had a right not to cooperate with law enforcement?
I never said that, no.
Did you ever tell him that he was free to leave?
I never spoke that, no.
Did you ever talk with him about how he would get back to his place of employment and his vehicle if he wanted to get back?
No, I did not.
You just merely sat and maintained a physical presence with him, is that right?
At that time, yes.
Did you ever leave or leave him alone?
Yes, I went back to the back sheriff's office to see what was going on and get what the plan was going to be at that point.
Was anybody else with Mr. Rivera while you did that?
No.
All right, did you say anything to him?
No, I did not.
Sir, do you have Miranda forms in your possession?
I typically do in a car, yeah.
And is it your practice to have those handy for when you give someone their Miranda rights?
Yes.
Professionally speaking, when do you use the Miranda form, or when do you give someone their Miranda rights?
Typically, if I know that the crime's been committed and they are the major suspect in the crime.
So whether or not they're in custody doesn't really matter, is that right?
I would say not.
So in your training and experience, you just do the form and so you get it out of the way, is that right?
I get it out of the way if he is a suspect, yes.
Do you use a written form?
Yes, I do.
In every case that you've done, and I'm not going to say everyone, but in the past year, have you used the Miranda form?
I'm going to object to relevance as to what Scott Green's practices are. They have no bearing on this case. It's not relevant.
Do you want to address that?
I think it's relevant as to what the best practices are, Your Honor.
Overrule, the witness may answer.
Can you ask that again?
In every case in the past year where you've been interrogating a major suspect, have you used the Miranda form?
If we made an arrest and we were going to do an interview, yes.
All right, and do you also carry with you a card that has the Miranda rights written on it?
Yes, I do.
And is that something similar to the card right here that you can kind of keep in your pocket or keep handy?
Yeah, I keep it in a visor. Yeah.
Do you recognize this card?
Not that particular size. Mine's DCI, about the size of a fit in your wallet.
Right, so yours is a business card size.
Yeah, mine's more like a business card size, yeah.
And who is that issued by?
I have no idea. We get issued to us when we come out as a special agent.
So it's something that everybody in the DCI has, is that right?
I think there's potential that everybody could have that. I did. I mean, I've had it all this time, so.
Is it from the Department of Public Safety?
Yeah.
All right, no further questions.
Any redirect?
Agent Green, was your physical presence in the lobby intended to keep Cristian Rivera there?
I know it was not.
Whenever you left the lobby, did you tell him anything to keep him in the lobby?
No, I did not.
If he wanted to leave, could he have gone through the same door he entered?
Yes, he could.
Could he have used his phone?
Yes, he could.
That's all.
Any recross?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Green, thank you for being here. You're excused.
Thank you.
State may call their next witness.
Next witness is Mike Fischels.
Mr. Fischels, let me swear you in before you're seated. Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay. Go ahead and be seated, please.
Agent Fischels, can you please state your name for the record?
Michael Fischels, spelled Fischels.
And how are you employed?
I'm a special agent with the Department of Homeland Security, Homeland Security Investigations.
And what are your duties with, it's abbreviated as HSI, is that correct?
That's correct.
What are your duties with HSI?
Primary duties are enforcing the Immigration and Nationality Act, enforcing Titles 8, 18, 19, and 21 of the U.S. Code, Those involve narcotics violations, immigration violations, customs violations, and other violations.
And are you a federal law enforcement officer?
Yes, I am.
How long have you been a federal law enforcement officer?
Since 1996, so just over 23 years.
And summarize for us what your duties have been in that period of time.
In 1996, I was hired by the Department of Justice back then, which was the United States Border Patrol. I worked on the southern border for about three and a half years. Then I was hired as an investigator in the Minneapolis office, where I worked for 6 years. And then I transferred to the Cedar Rapids, Iowa office, where I currently work.
Where did you grow up?
In Waterloo, Iowa.
And how long have you currently been in the assignment here in Iowa?
I've been at the Cedar Rapids office since 2005.
What's your educational background?
I graduated with a degree from Iowa State University, degree in sociology, and a minor in Spanish and a minor in criminal justice.
Do you speak the Spanish language?
Yes, I do.
How would you characterize your proficiency?
I would characterize it as proficient.
Is use of Spanish in your job a necessity?
Yes, in some cases.
Do you take any type of continuing education to be proficient in Spanish?
No, I don't.
It's just on the job?
Yes.
All right. Did you become involved in the investigation into the disappearance and death of Mollie Tibbetts?
Yes, I did.
When did that happen?
That was on August 19th of last year.
What was your purpose in becoming involved?
I received a call from the DCI, DCI Trent Vileta, who called me and asked me if he could request assistance from our office, from our agencies regarding a canvass of an area that they were going to conduct on the following day, which was August 20th.
Why would your expertise be needed in a canvass of, this was a canvass of Irby Farms?
That area, yes.
All right, and why would your expertise be needed for that particular canvass?
Our expertise in that area, it was a worksite location. DCI relayed that they believed there was going to be a number of Hispanic individuals, possibly Hispanic employees that were going to be present. We typically handle situations like that where we're able to speak with people from foreign countries. And so he asked for our assistance. In addition, 3 of the 4 HSI agents were able to speak Spanish. So we were able to do some interpreting for the DCI agents on site at the farm.
And that included you, right, as far as speaking Spanish?
Yes, it did.
All right. Was there a briefing and a plan to go to the farm?
Yes, there was.
Were you a part of that?
Yes, I was.
And the visit then to the farm was on August 20th of 2018?
Correct.
All right, whenever you went to the farm, did you identify yourself as associated with Homeland Security or Immigration Enforcement?
No, we did not.
Did you wear a badge or a gun or any insignia that would have associated you with the agency you work for?
We all had our badges and our guns on, but they were concealed, so they could not be seen.
Any other type of insignia on a jacket or otherwise that would have indicated you were with law enforcement?
No.
Whenever you were whenever you were tasked with assisting with the canvass, were you assigned to be with another state agent?
Yes.
Who was that?
I don't believe that I recall the DCI agent's name, Joe, something that I was with during an interview. Initially, I was assigned to be with DCI agent Scott Green when we arrived at the farm.
All right. Can you describe for the judge what happened when you arrived?
When we arrived at the farm, sheriff's deputies contacted the owner or operator of the farm. I was not part of that. Once we got the go-ahead that we had permission to be at the farm and to interview and contact the employees at the farm, we broke off into our teams. Agent Green and I contacted an individual, an employee who was working in an area of the farm on a skid loader or on a tractor, and we conducted a short interview with him. And from there, all the employees were brought to a central location, and weather was a big part of that. It was pouring down rain, so we got everybody inside, and we all centralized and met at this one location.
And what type of building was that, if you recall?
It was somewhat of an office building. There was a large open area where the employees were, and then there was an office that had a door on one side, and then that office joined with what I would call like a locker room. So it's kind of like a break room and an office and locker room all in one.
Did you went to this location?
Yes.
Did you have anything with summoning Cristian Rivera to that location?
No, I did not.
All right. Is Cristian Rivera someone you had met prior to August 20th of 2018?
No, I had not.
Were you told that he went by an alias?
Eventually I learned that he did go by an alias, yes.
What was the alias?
John Budd.
All right. So whenever you got back to this break room area, who did you speak with?
We originally spoke with one employee. I don't recall what his name was. We did an interview with him, and the second interview that I conducted with the DCI agent there was with Mr. Rivera.
Part of the reason in going to the farm was to do a canvass, as you've indicated, correct?
Correct.
Another purpose was to try to find Cristian Rivera specifically. Is that true?
Yes, and or his vehicle.
Okay. And you were aware that you and other officers would have been searching for what type of car?
A 2010 black Chevy Malibu.
Did you encounter Cristian Rivera in this break room at Yerby Farms?
Yes, I did. I was told that he had been identified as Mr. Rivera.
Where did you meet with him?
In the, I'll call it a break room, so it was a break room that adjoined to the big area where all the other employees were.
Was this an area that was a little more private than the main room?
Yes,
Did it have a door on it?
yes, it did.
Did you talk to Mr. Rivera in that room?
Yes,
Were you able to speak with him in Spanish?
yes, I was.
Was he able to respond to you in Spanish?
Yes, he was.
Did you ever speak any English to Mr. Rivera?
I did not speak English to him. I think my first question might have been in English to ask him if he spoke English. He responded that he did not, just the basics, and so then we proceeded in Spanish.
Whenever you were in this room, this break room, did you, was there any show of force by you or other officers?
No,
Did you physically touch Mr. Rivera?
no, I did not.
Did you shut the door to the room?
I believe the one door was shut, but then on the other side of the room, it was an open area that went into the locker room. That did not have a door on it, and that was open.
Did you sit at any kind of table or chairs? Or did
Yes, there was a table, and then there were chairs on both sides. I sat on one side, Mr. Rivera sat on the other, and then the DCI agent sat on the end of the table.
How would you describe Mr. Rivera's demeanor?
Calm, relaxed, very cooperative.
Did he respond to your questions?
Yes, he did.
By the way, this encounter with him that we're describing, was that recorded?
Yes, it was.
In what way?
The DCI agent had a recording device in his possession, was recording the question and interview on that.
Okay. And have you had a chance, by the way, to review that transcript?
Yes, I have.
All right. And it's listed under Exhibit 2, Rivera transcript. It's identified as number 1 Dairy Farm. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
All right. Can you open that PDF folder, please?
Yes.
Does this appear to be the transcript of the interaction and interview with him?
Yes, it does.
Is there any part of this interview, after you've reviewed it, that was left out or edited?
No, not to my knowledge.
This translation has a heading at the top, says U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
So your agency would have transcribed this particular document, is that right?
Correct.
All right, during your interaction with Cristian Rivera, did you obtain consent to search 2 vehicles?
Yes, we did.
Please describe that process for the judge. What happened?
The DCI agent had consent forms which were provided to myself to explain to Mr. Rivera what those forms were. I believe the forms were from the Division of Narcotics Enforcement, Department of Public Safety. I spoke with Mr. Rivera, asked him about consent to search the two vehicles. I explained the forms to him. They were the exact same forms. I began with the Altima, which is the vehicle that he had on site at the farm. He agreed that the DCI agents could search the Altima. He also agreed that they could search the 2010 black Chevy Malibu, which was located at his trailer. During that process, he agreed that they could search the vehicle. He also stated that he had been on the phone just recently, before speaking with us, with other authorities that were at his trailer. He also provided those authorities with permission to search his car that was located at the trailer. That was the 2010 Malibu. After explaining the forms, I wrote down the information, the details of the vehicles that we knew. He did not know his license plates, but I wrote the details of the vehicles on the forms. I explained those details, and then I provided the form to Mr. Rivera to read himself in Spanish.
Did he appear to read the form?
Yes, he did.
How do you know he was reading the form?
He originally told me that he could read in Spanish. He could not read in English. And when I provided him the form, he appeared to be reading the form line by line.
Okay, you're using your finger to demonstrate. Did he use his finger to go across the page?
I don't recall if he did or not. That's just my nonverbal of it looked like he was reading left to right.
On that form, is there an indication that he has the right to refuse consent?
Yes, there is.
This form that we have, which is Exhibit 20, if you can look at that.
Okay.
Okay, can you indicate for the judge what portion of that form would indicate that he has the right to refuse? What does it start with?
It would be the last three paragraphs, if you will. In the first line of the first paragraph says, "Yo no he sido."
That would be as he has the right to refuse?
That whole part talks about the right to refuse, his rights, constitutional rights to refuse the search, and that he's not being forced to agree to this.
And again, Mr. Rivera appeared to read the entirety of the form.
Yes, he did.
Now, you did this with both cars, is that right?
Correct.
The first form that he read was the Altima, would that be true?
Correct.
All right, he appeared to read that form as you indicated?
Yes, he did.
Okay, how was the Malibu, that consent then handled? In the same exact way, or were there some differences?
There were some differences. Instead of having Mr. Rivera reread the same form, I explained to him that this form for the Malibu is the exact same form. I showed him the Malibu description, and then he signed at the bottom.
Did you also sign the form?
Yes, I signed both forms.
And was it witnessed by another law enforcement agent?
Yes.
Is that Joe Arian?
Yes, sir.
His form is on, or his signature is on there?
Yes.
At any time, did Cristian Rivera indicate that, or give you any indication that he had any hesitation at all signing the form or giving consent?
No, he did not.
Did he ever withdraw consent in your presence?
No, he did not.
Did you or any other officers ever do anything that would indicate a threat to him or a promise or anything of that nature?
No, he did not.
So after obtaining consent to search the vehicles, he would no longer have access to them. Would that be true?
True.
Okay, law enforcement would take them to search them.
Correct.
All right. So he now has no transportation, right?
That's correct.
All right. Did you ask him anything about accompanying law enforcement to the sheriff's office to be interviewed?
Yes, after I discussed that with the DCI agent, I asked Mr. Rivera if he'd be willing to go down to the Powashik County Sheriff's Office to continue an interview with a DCI and a more fluent interpreter.
Did you ask him, is that on the transcript?
Yes, it is.
Your foreman really summoning him to the sheriff's office?
Yes.
Okay. And was it given in a way that if he wanted to decline, he could have done that?
Yes.
What time of day was this, by the way, that you asked him if he wanted to go to the sheriff's office to be interviewed?
I believe it was approximately 3:30 p.m. We had arrived at the farm about 1:30 p.m., so this was about 2 hours after we had initially arrived at the farm.
To your knowledge, did any officer indicate that they would give him a ride back once the interview was done?
I believe I told Mr. Rivera that somebody could bring him back, but I don't think we designated who that officer would be.
Again, would that appear in the transcript?
Yes, it would.
After concluding your interaction with Cristian Rivera, did you have anything else to do with him?
Yes. After we were done at the farm, we went back to the Powashik County Sheriff's Office, where we took 2 index fingerprints of Mr. Rivera to run through our immigration system. That took about 10 minutes, and then we left the sheriff's office.
And where was it that you would have found Mr. Rivera at the sheriff's office in order to take those fingerprints?
He was in an interview room at the office.
Okay, so he was already out of the lobby and back in an interview room.
Yes.
Did you see any other officers whenever you did that particular task?
Yes, there was a female there that was interpreting. I think she was from Iowa City, and there was another gentleman from Iowa City also there.
Did you know Pamela Romero or Jeff Fink?
I don't know them personally, I just know them from this case.
Okay. Other than that, did you have any other interaction with Cristian Rivera?
Not in person, but by phone.
Okay. We'll talk about that here in just a second. Now, back to the farm. Well, first of all, by the way, go get back to the transcript. If do you have it up there?
Yes.
Okay. On the transcript, Bahena Rivera is identified where he makes statements. Is that correct? In the left column.
Yes.
There are also designations of UM, UM2, and UM3. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Who is UM?
I'm designated as UM.
Who is UM2?
UM2 is the DCI agent Joe.
All right, and then UM3 towards the end of the transcript is who?
UM3 is Dane Lang, the owner-operator of Yerby Farms.
Towards the end of your interaction with Mr. Rivera at the farm, did Dane interject himself into the conversation?
Yes, he did. Mr. Rivera had wanted to make sure that if he was going to go to the sheriff's office, that it was okay with his boss, and his boss being Mr. Dane Lang.
Did Mr. Lang then bring up Larrabee Farms' lawyer?
Yes, he did.
And how did he identify him by name?
McAfee, I believe it was spelled.
Mahaffey?
Mahaffey, sorry.
Now, everything that Dane would have asked you or had spoken in English, would you have translated for Cristian Rivera?
I did translate it for Mr. Rivera by choice. Mr. Lang did not ask me to do that. I just did it on my own.
Mr. Lang indicates on page 24 that he'll call Mike. Is that Mike Mahaffey?
Yes.
And you tell Mr. Rivera in the following sentence or two that I'm going to tell him you're going to call the attorney. Is that right?
Yes, I started to tell Mr. Rivera that Mr. Lang was going to call the company attorney, and then I stopped and spoke to Mr. Lang in English to let him know, hey, I'm going to tell Mr. Rivera that you're going to call the attorney, and then I went back to Spanish and continued to tell Mr. Rivera that Mr. Lang was going to call the attorney of the company.
All right. So this conversation occurs on page 24 of the transcript. Is that why, right?
Yes,
And by the way, the italicized text is, what does that designate?
English,
All right, and the block text is what?
Spanish.
You tell, on the top of page 24, Mr. Rivera, he will call the attorney of your company for you as well. You don't need it, but for him, he wants to. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
Why did you tell Mr. Rivera you don't need it in that context? Can you explain that?
Yes, at that point, Mr. Lang had said he was going to call the company attorney. In that case, the attorney is an attorney for the company. I believe that Mr. Lang was having the attorney go down there on behalf of the company. So I wanted Mr. Rivera to know that that attorney was going down there because Mr. Lang is requesting that attorney to go, not Mr. Rivera.
All right, and did you also let Mr. Rivera know that he could meet him at the sheriff's office if he wanted that to happen?
Yes,
Agent Fischels, were you trying to steer Mr. Rivera away from a lawyer?
absolutely not.
Okay. Would you have translated this conversation for him if that was your goal?
No, I would not have.
Did you give Mr. Rivera an opportunity to obtain any personal items, including medication, shoes, keys, anything of that nature?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Did you or any other officer, to your knowledge, ever place handcuffs or restraints on Mr. Rivera?
No,
Once he left that building where you encountered him, did you have anything else to do with him at the farm?
no, I did not.
All right, then the fingerprints occurred at the sheriff's office, correct?
Correct?
Did you then have later involvement in this case?
Yes, I did.
Can you describe that for the court, please?
After I left the sheriff's office, which would be after we took the fingerprints, we traveled back to Cedar Rapids. And approximately 11:30 p.m., I received a phone call from Agent Villeta asking me if I'd be willing to speak with Mr. Rivera on the phone regarding his immigration status. And so at that point, I spoke with Mr. Rivera by telephone
What was the purpose of that call?
to determine the immigration status of Mr. Rivera.
And is there a certain protocol that you follow in doing that?
There's not a protocol. If there's an individual that we determine to be an illegal alien or undocumented alien, and we choose to file a detainer with the jail or with the agency, then we'll do that via a hard form immigration detainer.
And is that what this process was on the phone?
Yes, it was.
Was the intention at that point to detain Cristian Rivera based upon his immigration status?
If I determine him to be out of status, yes.
Okay, how is it that you make that determination?
I speak with, in this case, I spoke with Mr. Rivera. I determined him to be a citizen and national of Mexico, present here in the United States without authorization, meaning he entered into the United States illegally and was still currently present in the United States illegally.
By the way, did your fingerprints turn up anything in your system?
No, they did not.
During this conversation with Cristian Rivera, did he make a comment about if family would be able to contact him once he was wherever it was he was supposed to go?
I don't recall him asking about family.
Did you tell him where he was going to be detained?
I did. At that point, I thought he was going to be detained at the Tama County Jail.
And at the time that you spoke to him, he was at Poweshiek County Sheriff's Office, is that right?
Correct.
So he would have to be transported by law enforcement to Tama County.
Correct.
Are there certain facilities designated in Iowa to hold people who are in custody as a result of being detained in the manner that you've described?
There are. We have contracts with certain facilities across the state.
Wait a second. Anything else? Once you completed your conversation with him on the phone, well, first of all, how long did that take? I'm sorry. Do you know?
2 minutes?
Once you hung up with him, did you have any other interaction with him?
No.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cross-examination.
Agent Fischels, I want to clarify a couple things. Do you have page 24 of the transcript there in front of you?
Yes, I do.
I want you to look at that. And the last comment you made in Spanish to Mr. Rivera about an attorney was that you don't need it, but for him, he wants to, right?
Correct.
After that, you said nothing else to Mr. Rivera about an attorney, did you?
No.
Turn back a page if you don't mind. I believe it was your testimony to Mr. Brown in response to questioning about telling Mr. Rivera that the attorney could meet him down at the sheriff's office. Do you recall that line of questioning?
Yes.
And you told Mr. Rivera that the attorney could meet him at the sheriff's office?
I told Mr. Rivera that Mr. Lang was going to have the attorney go to the sheriff's office, I believe.
Okay, can you briefly peruse page 23 or any other page and tell me where that is?
I don't see it on here, but right below on page 24, there's some intelligible voices overlap, and it may have been there.
So there's nowhere in this transcript where you can point to that you told Mr. Rivera in Spanish that an attorney was going to meet him there, right?
No, just where I told him that Mr. Lang was going to call the attorney.
Right. On page 23, 4 or 5 lines up from the bottom, you see that? Where it starts UM3, which we know is Mr. Lang, right?
Yes.
And it starts, yeah, that's fine, in italics, do you see that?
Yes, I see that.
And he states there, Mr. Lang, I might call Mahaffey, who is our farm lawyer, that's in English, right?
That's correct.
And you respond in English, okay?
Yes.
And then Mr. Lang tells you directly in English, otherwise, he's not going to have a legal representative. Is that correct?
Yep, that's what it says.
And that's the only discussion you had with Mr. Lang about a legal representative, right?
Yes, except that shortly thereafter he mentions Mike again.
Right. Mr. Lang never told you they wanted a lawyer down there for ERB Farmers. He said he, and clearly the implication is that it's Mr. Bahena, right?
He says a farm lawyer.
He also says there, otherwise, he's not going to have a legal representative.
Yes, he says that.
Okay. And who did you interpret he to mean?
At that point, I don't think I thought about what he was. He had mentioned the farm lawyer. I knew there were some issues at the farm regarding illegal employment at that point, so I assumed that he wanted the farm lawyer down there for his company.
Your assumption was he wanted the farm lawyer down there for the company for the interview of Mr. Rivera. That's your assumption.
Yes.
And did you make it clear to Mr. Lang that this had nothing to do with immigration?
We did not discuss immigration at all at the farm.
Did you tell Mr. Lang what the interview was about?
No.
Did anybody tell Mr. Bahena what the interview was going to be about?
Let me clarify. At the sheriff's office,
No, at the farm.
it was just the content of the interview that he would understand what it was about. Yes.
Early on, you described your job description as investigating violations, I believe, of Title 8, 9, 18, and 21 of the U.S. Code, right?
Yes, those are part of it. Yes.
Is your job description to also provide interpreting services to local law enforcement?
That's other duties. It's not part of a statute. Yes.
Do you find yourself doing that often?
Not often.
Other than this case, how many times in the last 12 months have you provided interpreting services to local law enforcement?
Less than a dozen.
And in this case, I believe the number is 12 law enforcement officers showed up to Yerby Farms. Does that comport with your recollection?
I don't know the exact number, but it seems about right.
And of those 12, 4 were with HSI, right?
Correct.
And assume with me for a minute that if every individual there did not want to speak to anybody, just would have turned around and walked away, they would have been free to just do that, right?
Yes?
You wouldn't have taken Mr. Bahena into immigration custody?
No.
You had no intelligence on him prior to August 20th whatsoever?
No.
When Mr. or Agent Valletta contacted you the day before, he didn't identify Mr. Bahena by name
Nope.
or his automobile?
Yes, I got information on the black Malibu, either the night of the 19th or the morning of the 20th. I can't remember which day that was.
What'd that information entail?
I believe it was just a license plate number, and it might have been a photo of the vehicle.
What'd you do with that information?
I didn't do anything with the car information, but I was given information that the area they were going to canvass was Yerby Farms. So we did some just basic record checks on Yerby Farms, the area, but I don't think we did anything with the car.
If you're supporting law enforcement and providing interpreting services, why are you doing records checks on Yerby Farms?
Because that's what we do when we go do any type of operation or canvassing to know where we're going.
Is it common when you support law enforcement like this to take buccal swabs of Hispanics?
No.
And then how long after the canvass was done at Yerby Farms was it before you returned to the Poweshiek County Sheriff's Office? Was it a half hour, an hour?
I think we were there for at least another hour after Mr. Rivera was taken to the sheriff's office.
And if you were there in a support role to interpret for law enforcement, why were you not utilized to interpret the interview?
Objection's overruled. The witness may answer if he knows.
I can only assume, first of all, I am not a native speaker. I'm not a fluent speaker. I'm a proficient speaker, so we were there just to help in the field for an in-depth, lengthy interview. A fluent or professional speaker or interpreter would be used.
Okay. So it wasn't anything to do with your decision?
I was not asked to conduct the interview. If I had been asked to conduct the interview, I would have declined.
Based upon what?
Based upon my proficiency. I'm not a fluent native Spanish speaker.
What kind of education and training do you have in the area of speaking Spanish?
I took 4 years of Spanish in high school. I received a minor degree from Iowa State in Spanish, and then we had 5 months of intense Spanish training prior to being a Border Patrol agent. And then we used the Border Patrol, or in the Border Patrol, we used Spanish as our primary language at work for the time that I was at the border, and then continued to use the language for work in the coming years.
In your role working for HSI, if you're doing a drug investigation or a conspiracy investigation, do you use interpreters?
We use interpreters if we don't have agents who speak that language.
Okay. Do you have a master's degree in Spanish?
No, I have a minor.
Okay. We heard some talk earlier about your qualifications. They don't include a master's degree?
No, sir.
When you went to the Yerby Farms, were you trying to keep your identity as an HSI agent secret?
Not secret, but we were not going to advertise that we were there as HSI. We were there to assist DCI.
Okay. Did anybody say when you went to Yerby Farms that we're not from immigration?
Not to my knowledge.
But again, it wasn't that you were trying to protect your identity or anything like that that prevented you from offering assistance at the sheriff's office as far as interpreting.
No, I wouldn't conduct that lengthy of an interview, especially when there was an alternative source, which was a native speaker.
And there was no request made by anybody of you.
No.
It seems like you had forms at your disposal for consent searches, right?
Yes.
You have forms at your disposal for Miranda?
I have my own Miranda card, but we use the state forms for the consent.
But you carry a Miranda card with you?
Yes, I do.
Do you use that, that card regularly?
If needed, if I'm in a position where I need to provide Miranda, yes, I do. But that's not on a daily basis.
Right. But when you do advise Miranda, you use the card?
Yes, I do. Or a form. If we're at our office and I have a hard copy form, I will use a form versus a card.
So you read the form, have the person interviewed sign it?
Yes, with a witness and my own signature.
And that's just best practice, right?
If that's available, yes.
There was no discussion about taking Mr. Bahena into custody at all on an immigration detainer prior to him going to the Poweshiek County Sheriff?
No, sir.
And this was the only time HSI was contacted at all in this immigration, or in this case, right?
It's the only time that our office had been contacted. I'm not sure about the Des Moines office or another office in Iowa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Redirect.
No more questions, thank you.
Thank you. Agent, you're excused. State can call their next witness.
Next witness is Pamela Romero. Can you grab her, thanks?
I'll swear you in before you're seated. Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Okay, you can be seated if you would, please.
Ms. Romero, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. Can you state your name for the record, please?
Yes, my name is Pamela Romero.
And spell your first and last name, please.
Pamela, my first name, last name Romero.
How are you currently employed, Ms. Romero?
I am currently employed as a bilingual recruiting specialist at West Liberty Foods, Iowa.
Do you have previous law enforcement experience?
Yes,
Can you describe that for the court, please?
I graduated from the Cedar Rapids Academy, 143rd Basic, in December 11 of 2015. I worked with West Liberty Police Department for 2.5 years, later transferring to the Iowa City Police Department, where I worked 11 months.
Now, you had mentioned what you do for West Liberty Foods. Can you describe that for us one more time?
It's a recruiting office, so I am a recruiter providing employment to candidates.
Did you leave employment in Iowa City for this job?
No,
Okay. Did you have a job? I guess what I'm getting at is your employment history. Did you have a job in between the Iowa City Police Department and West Liberty Foods?
yes, I started working as a certified nursing assistant at the University of Iowa for 3 months.
And then switched to West Liberty Foods?
Yes,
Okay. Do you live in West Liberty?
yes, I do.
So is the job in West Liberty a lot closer to home?
Correct.
You're married?
Yes,
You have small children?
I have small children, 3 girls.
Okay. And one on the way, is that correct?
That is correct.
What's your due date?
March 21st. And it's a boy.
Okay. All right. Ms. Romero, in your law enforcement experience with West Liberty and Iowa City, can you just describe what your duties were?
Yes, I was, my duties at the Iowa City Police Department was just as a patrol officer. I was out in the streets patrolling, answering calls, community calls, and just doing the general basic of a police officer.
Okay, it's the same true with West Liberty as well?
That is correct, yes.
Why did you move from West Liberty to Iowa City?
The reason why it's because I started at West Liberty, a small town. I wanted to have a little bit more of a challenge, and I thought Iowa City would be a good place to be working at, which it was, and that's why the moved, because I wanted to challenge myself for a bigger department.
You left about a year later, is that right?
That is correct.
Was you were working third shift in Iowa City?
I was.
Was that difficult on family life?
That was very difficult on family life. My youngest one they were having school problems academically, and I decided not. That's why I left.
I don't mean to pry. I just want to, that's why you left Iowa City?
Correct.
Was because of the
Family.
work schedule and family.
Obligations. Mhm.
Where does your husband work?
Yes, he does.
Where is that?
U.S. Auto Force in West Branch, Iowa.
All right. Ms. Romero, do you speak Spanish fluently?
Yes.
All right. How is it that you speak Spanish fluently? Can you describe that for the judge? Give us your history.
Yes. I am the daughter of an immigrant family that came here back in 1989. So I was born and raised in Mexico. I could say that. I was 10 when I came here to the United States. English is my second language.
So you speak Spanish fluently, is that correct?
Correct.
We've heard other witnesses describe themselves as proficient in Spanish. Would speaking fluently be above that?
I will say I use Spanish 90% of my life, like in my daily routines and everything.
Do you use Spanish with your children
Yes.
and with your husband
Yes.
and with other family members?
Yes.
Do you use Spanish regularly in the job that you work at West Liberty Foods?
Yes.
All right, as part of your law enforcement experience, Ms. Romero, were you trained in interview techniques?
I went to 2 classes, one in December of 2016. It's CTK class, and then one in February of 2017.
So you have some training in interview and interrogation, would that be true?
That is true.
Through CTK?
Correct.
Who sent you to that? Was that West Liberty or was that Iowa City?
That was West Liberty.
Did you ever have a chance to take advantage of that training in an interview setting other than Cristian Rivera?
Not really.
I mean, you've done other interviews with other suspects, I assume, is that correct?
That is correct.
Were most of those in English?
No, there were 2 in Spanish and 1 in English.
Okay, so you do have some interview experience in Spanish with potential suspects or persons of interest, is that true?
Yes.
All right. Ms. Romero, I want to direct your attention back to July of 2018. Did you become involved in the investigation into the disappearance and death of Mollie Tibbetts? You have to answer out loud?
Yes.
Okay. Whenever you became involved, was it as somebody who was going to do interviews or in some other capacity?
I was just there as needed. My thought at the beginning was that I was going to be helped out, or be helping out as a translator.
Okay. Did you assist with area canvasses of residences and properties?
Yes, performing interviews.
Do you know how many days you would have spent loaning your services out to DCI in the investigation prior to the interview of Mr. Rivera?
1 day.
On August 20th, were you contacted by law enforcement in Poweshiek County to assist with an interview of Cristian Rivera?
Yes.
How were you notified?
It was my day off. I received a call from one of the DCI agents saying that if I was available to come over to help out.
Okay. And did you agree to do that?
Yes.
Were you a law enforcement officer at the time?
Yes, I was.
So you were still employed with the Iowa City Police Department?
Yes, I was.
All right. Did you come to Montezuma, to the sheriff's office?
Yes.
Did any other officer come with you?
Yes.
Who was that?
Jeff Fink from Iowa City Police Department.
All right. Does Officer Fink have a level of proficiency in Spanish?
To my knowledge, yes.
Have you spoken Spanish with him before?
Yes.
Was he your supervisor or any type of authority figure from work?
Yes, he was.
In what way?
At that time, he was my sergeant at late nights.
So he's the sergeant on the shift?
Yes.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Right. He was the sergeant on the shift that you were currently working at the time?
Correct.
Where were you told Mr. Rivera was located whenever you arrived at the sheriff's office?
In the lobby of the sheriff's office.
Whenever you arrived at the sheriff's office, did you meet with Agent Valletta and other law enforcement?
Yes.
Did they brief you at least on what the stage of the investigation at that point?
Yes.
Did that meeting take place prior to you meeting with Mr. Rivera?
Yes.
At some point, did you go into the lobby and introduce yourself to Cristian Rivera?
Yes.
Did you bring him back to the interview room?
Yes.
All right, I want you to tell us what happened when you went to the lobby. Describe that for the judge, what happened and what the conversation was between you and Mr. Rivera.
Okay. I went out to the lobby. I introduced myself. I said, I'm Pamela Romero. I am here. We're going to go ahead and, well, I actually went out first, introduced myself. I said, thank you for waiting. We're going to go ahead and be with you in a little bit. And then after that, the second time that I went out, I brought him back to the interview room where we went through some unlocked doors. And before I got him into the interview room, I told him, do you see...
Just a second, I'll go through that.
Okay.
I kind of threw it a little bit too wide open too.
Okay.
So whenever you went to the lobby, you went out there 2 times?
Correct.
The first time and the second time that you went out there, did you speak Spanish?
Yes.
Was there any English spoken between the two, between you and Mr. Rivera?
No.
All right, the second time whenever you went to the lobby, where was Mr. Rivera seated?
He was sitting next in a chair. I mean, that was the first time that I was in the lobby too. There was an exit door to the left, I believe, and then some restrooms to the right. He was sitting face down with his cell phone.
Did he have his cell phone in his hand?
Yes.
On either occasion when you were in the lobby, did you observe him to use it?
Yes.
All right, did you make any attempt to take it away from him?
No.
All right, whenever you went out into the lobby the second time, where did you take Mr. Rivera?
To one of the back rooms, the interview rooms at the sheriff's office.
Is there a hallway that you walk down to get to the interview room?
Yes.
Was anyone else waiting in the interview room?
No.
Whenever you walked down the hallway after passing through the door, did you have any conversation with Mr. Rivera about how he could leave the building?
Yes.
Describe that for the judge, please.
So I was walking him through the hallway we were going, showing him the doors that we were going through. I told him that they were unlocked. I showed him the exit sign. I asked him, do you see the exit sign? Where he replied, yes. Said, you can go ahead and leave whenever you want to. We went into the interview room. I showed him the door that it was unlocked. And at this point, he still had his cell phone with him too. So.
Okay, so while you're in this conversation with him in the hallway, this is not recorded, is that right?
No.
All right, you told him that he could leave at any time?
Yes.
You told him that in Spanish?
Yes.
By the way, were there any conversations with Cristian Rivera that aren't recorded that were in English or any other language other than Spanish?
No.
After showing him the exits from the building, did you go with him into the interview room?
Yes.
What was his demeanor whenever you saw him in the lobby and in the hallway? How would you describe him?
He was polite. He was engaged in my conversation. We were making conversation about the day, his work day. So it was just like normal misdemeanor to me, what I think that it will be.
Did he ever give you any indication that he did not want to be there?
No.
Once you were in the interview room, where was he seated?
He was seated in one of the back The room, he was in one of the corners, and then I was right next to him, and then Officer Fink was right across him.
Okay. Now, this interview was recorded, correct?
Yes,
You've reviewed that video?
yes,
All right. It shows all that happened in the interview. Is that right?
yes,
It also captures all the questions and answers. Is that true?
yes, that is true.
The door that goes into the interview room, was it locked or secured in any way?
It was unlocked. It was not secure.
Was that demonstrated to Mr. Rivera?
Yes, it was,
By who?
by Officer Fink.
All right. Ms. Romero, when the interview began, or at any time during the interview, the whole time, I guess the total time you were there, I think, has been demonstrated in testimonies of close to about 11 hours. Did you ever, during that time frame, before you left the sheriff's office, did you know the location of Mollie Tibbetts' body?
No,
Did you know that Mollie Tibbetts' body had been covered at all in corn leaves?
no,
Did you ever learn what injuries she had to her torso or to her neck or head?
no,
Did you have any awareness at all that Mollie Tibbetts' blood was in the trunk of the Malibu?
no,
At one point in the interview, Ms. Romero, you asked Mr. Rivera about a hair in the car. Do you recall that?
yes.
Where did you receive that information?
I remember taking a break, which I was told by one of the DCI agents during that break that they had found hair.
Did you know if that was true or not true?
I did not at the time.
Okay. Did you rely on what you were told
Correct.
whenever you would have asked Mr. Rivera about the hair?
Yes,
Were you intentionally deceitful with him about the hair?
no,
Now, you did not read Miranda warnings or not give Miranda warnings to Mr. Rivera until later in the interview, is that right?
that is right.
So why not give Cristian Rivera Miranda warnings at the very beginning whenever you went in with him to the interview room?
Because he was not in custody.
Okay. Did he become in custody at some point during the night?
When there was a detainer issued to him.
During the interview, by the way, the information that we have is that the interview started shortly after 5 p.m. Is that your recollection?
Yes,
There were multiple breaks that were taken during the interview.
that is correct, yes.
Okay. Between the time that the interview began at approximately 5 p.m. and when the detainer was read to him, that's about a 5-hour period. Would you agree?
Yes,
Almost 6. Is that yes?
yes,
All right. During that time frame, in that segment, did you ever get any indication that Cristian Rivera was tired?
no, he was, again, very engaged in my questions and answering them fine. At that time, yes.
Later in the interview, there is some indication that he is sleepy or tired. Would that be true?
That will be true. I mean,
You were
everybody was, I was tired too.
Okay. Initially in the interview, when Mr. Rivera is asked questions, does he admit right away that he had seen Mollie Tibbetts or had any interaction with her on the night she disappeared?
No,
He denied it.
he denied it.
At some point in the interview, he indicates that he did see her on the
Correct.
night she disappeared. Is that true?
Yes,
And we're summarizing this, but it's all in the transcript, right?
yes,
During this initial part of the interview, or actually I should say during the 6 hours prior to the detainer being read, Was Cristian Rivera allowed to keep his cell phone?
Yes,
Did he appear to use it while he was in your presence?
yes.
In what way?
He was, did the motion of sending text messages.
His fingers were on the screen?
Yes.
Appearing to be typing?
Correct.
Did he appear to be also reading responsive text messages?
Yes,
Did you ever try to take his cell phone away from him?
no,
Did you ever ask him at any time during the interview, who are you texting?
no,
Who are you talking to? Anything of that nature?
no,
During the first part of the interview, for, I would say, by my recollection, for the first couple of hours, you asked a lot of questions relating to his family, job status, personal information. Do you recall that?
I do.
What's the purpose in asking questions like that?
Just wanted to know who Kristian was, if he was a member of the community of Brooklyn, and how he was there, I just wanted to gather information about him and his person.
Is one of the purposes of asking questions like that to observe if he has any type of mental weakness or challenge?
No?
He didn't have that, but is that one of the purposes of asking those questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Obtaining information, getting,
But you did not witness that, correct?
correct.
Did he have any difficulty tracking those types of questions?
No,
Did he ever tell you he wanted to leave?
no,
By the way, during this part of the questioning in the early stages, did you confirm that he had given consent to search the Malibu?
yes.
Can you describe that for the court, please?
So I asked him if he had talked to law enforcement about his vehicle, and he said yes. He said that that was fine.
Okay. Again, that's in the transcript of the interview as well, is that right?
Yes.
Thank you, Switch.
Mr. Brown, let's take this as an opportunity to
Sure.
take our afternoon recess. We'll be in recess for 15 minutes.
Okay.